As far as I'm concerned, anybody on planet Earth can achieve anything they want to do. It's a matter of dreaming big. It's a matter of setting goals. It's having the desire to pursue these things, and it's obvious that Nancy did that in diamonds in her day.
It's quite fascinating because Nancy, with a mere primary school education till the age of 14, ended up training pilots during World War II in the United States. Extraordinary things for a young girl from this area.
For a lady to achieve something like that when they left Ireland with nothing, it was just brilliant.
Well, my Aunt Nancy was a very pretty woman. She was very ambitious. She could have been a movie star.
What she'd accomplished in those days was just monumental, unbelievable.
Nancy Corrigan was born in this beautiful, beautiful part of the country in around about 1914, and people at that time were very, very poor. My grandfather, Thomas Corrigan, was a brother of Maggie War Corrigan, and Maggie War was Nancy's mother. Maggie War was born in this house. At the time, it would have been a long house going up and down this way. That would be just the end room. It would have been a thatched house. Like in those days, the houses didn't need insulation because the walls were very thick, and they'd have the animals in the houses as well. Maggie War married John Corrigan from over the village, and they built a house over there. It was a small house, so they'd all have shared beds. And their 4 daughters. There was Mary and Bridget and Nancy and Kathleen. We know that Nancy went to Tunriggy School. She was a good student. She was good at her lessons. Generally speaking, they would go to school barefoot, and they would wear these lovely white bibs to school. They would carry 2 sods of turf under their axter to school for the school fire. Nancy would have been a strong little girl because the young children that time, when they'd come home from school, they'd have a lot of work to do. As soon as they'd have their lessons done, they'd have to maybe go out and bring back the cows from the hills. They might have to go down to the shore picking winkles for the dinner. All of these jobs would have made them resilient and resourceful and confident. Well, the story goes that when Nancy was very small, she and her sister were out playing in Owenduff, and a plane came across the horizon, and Nancy looked up at it and she said, "That's what I want to do when I'm big." And I think at that time, Alcock and Brown landed in Clifton. They would have been all talking about it because Clifton's not that far away. So I think that's how Nancy got the idea of flying, and it never left her.
I think as a young girl in America, especially when I was growing up, you were groomed with the idea that you could be anything that you want. I'm sure that that was not necessarily the case here years and years ago when Nancy was growing up. So the fact that she even dreamt those dreams and attempted some of the things that she did is astounding. There's women today that wouldn't be brave enough to do the things that Nancy has done.
I understand that women were actually much worse off in the 1920s than they had been during the period 1914, 1916. In 1927, there was the Synod of Maynooth was held, it's sort of a bishops' conference, and there was a statement published by the bishops. There would have been a sort of a suppression of female sexuality, and there would have been an emphasis on the woman staying at home They definitely didn't like the idea of fashion, and Nancy went on to be a model. So I couldn't imagine Nancy thriving if she had stayed at home. Nancy's father, John Corrigan, was employed on the railway, and that was a wonderful thing at the time. It was wonderful to be employed. The railway did bring a lot of employment to the area.
There was efforts on the part of the British government at the time to extend railway lines to the west of Ireland, and same true of Donegal and Sligo and West Clare, Galway, Dingle. It was a general new transport vision that they had for outlying areas at the time. Nancy, the railway line would have passed just outside her door, or very near to her home. I would say it was a big thing for the family, because the landscape was one of very poor employment, if any. People had to immigrate, and if you got a job at home, you'd be very happy with it. So even the job may not be the most rewarding in the world financially, but it was a great bonus for anybody to have local employment.
Nancy's father died when Nancy was quite young.
I heard that he died on the railway. I'm not sure what kind of accident it was.
Now, this is a marking stone, and this is more likely the kind of stone that John Corrigan would have had. We're finding it a great difficulty finding his actual grave, but we're pretty sure that he would have been buried here, because our village of Owenduff is just across the sea there, and they would come across, when there would be a funeral, they'd come across in their currachs in a kind of a convoy, and the body would be buried here. So it's, as you can see around the graveyard, there are a lot of these marking stones, so it would be very difficult to tell which one was his, because it happened such a long time ago.
That would have been devastating, in the fact that a breadwinner dies is very bad news.
My grandfather got killed on a train. And my mother, being the oldest girl, became the housekeeper, dropped out of school at age 10, and took care of her sisters while her mother took care of the sheep and did some farming.
Maggie Moore was left with 4 young girls to look after. All she had was a little bit of land, and she used to work the land. She was a great farmer, but it was been really, really difficult to raise them. So the choice that she had was really just to go to Scotland or to England or to America, but most of the people around that time went over to Scotland picking potatoes, and they didn't have a very good life.
And they worked hard. They would have to be up at 5 or 6 in the morning out in the potato fields. Father O'Donnell wrote about it. He felt it was a use of almost slave labour, of child labour.
Maggie, though, was a very strong-willed woman, and maybe that's where Nancy got her strength. Maggie thought, no, I'll take them to America, even though that would have been much more expensive at the time to raise the fares. But she knew that with her Corrigan connections in Cleveland, Ohio, that the girls would have a much better chance.
The connection between Achill Parish and Cleveland is very long-standing and very deep. It's a phenomenon of what is called chain migration, where one person migrates to a particular place and then finds success there and sends back to others in their same home place to come and join them. One of the first waves of Achill migration to Cleveland happened in the 1860s. Apparently, there were several successive years of bad growing conditions in Achill at that time, and Cleveland in the early 1860s was in one of its earlier waves of booming. There's just a very, very strong connection.
Well, this postcard, it's a postcard depicting the SS Republic on which Nancy travelled with her mother and her other sister in 1929, and Nancy's handwriting is on the back. Sailing from Cove, Queenstown, County Cork, Ireland, August the 22nd, 1929. Landed in New Jersey the day before Labour Day. So I checked out the manifests, the ship's records for the SS Republic for that, and I found their three names, Maggie War and the two daughters, Nancy and Kathleen. And there's a mine of information here, like whose house they were living in and where they went to. And according to these records, the person who paid for their fare was Mary, who'd have been the eldest daughter of Maggie, who was sent out in advance to raise the money for the fare for the other three.
My grandmother was the oldest of the four girls. She was also the first one to leave Ireland and emigrate to the States. And then piece by piece brought over her sister Bridget, her sister Nancy was aiding in her sister Nancy, her sister Kelly, Kathleen, and her mother.
I really think that the journey that Nancy took from a small village in Achill Parish on the west coast of Ireland to becoming a female aviator here in Cleveland and across the nation was an extraordinary journey and probably speaks to some innate pluck and spunkiness and ambition on her part. But she really, I would say, took advantage of the opportunities that she saw around her.
John Corrigan, my brother, and I are all related to Nancy, so we're pooling our resources to find out more about this amazing woman. Imagine to leave that house, which would have been a thatched house,
Yeah.
and then gone off to America 3 years after leaving school, and then gone on to become a glamorous model in New York.
Yeah, don't forget she was flying maybe only about 30 years after airplanes were actually invented, you know.
Wow, wow, yeah.
We've been on the moon for
Wow.
longer than that.
Wow.
And to think that a girl with a national school education could leave and actually be flying within 3 or 4 years of leaving Owen Duff.
That's amazing.
It's just amazing, really.
She'd never get that chance if she stayed at home in
No.
Ireland. Wow,
So there is a lot to be said for immigration.
yeah. I'm here now in Cleveland. I'm in the Terminal Tower building. This is where Nancy would have arrived in 1929. And I'm going to meet Margaret Lynch. She's a local historian. Her people come from Achill. So I'm really looking forward to finding out what kind of Cleveland did Nancy arrive to in 1929. Oh, you did. That's fantastic. Yeah. Right. So this is where Nancy was.
So this is the site that she would have walked out onto. Public Square, Cleveland's front porch, if you will. Coming out and up into this very bustling public place, very different from what she had been, what she left behind, you know.
Do you think she would have found it intimidating coming from Achill to this?
I think a lot of people would, but I'm not sure about her. She seemed to have a lot of spunk, and maybe she found it exciting.
Wow, yeah.
One of the many lucky coincidences, I would say, in Nancy's life is that she arrived in Cleveland in August of 1929, right at the time when the very first National Air Show was held here in Cleveland. Right there is her dream, what she can imagine for herself on the very first day that she arrives. That's pretty incredible. At that time, Cleveland was the 6th largest city in the U.S., and it was a mixed industrial center. It was a bustling place. There was a lot to bring people here throughout the 20s and into the 30s. When they arrived in 1929, they had family members already here. Nancy's 2 older sisters were here, I believe, already, and an aunt. The tendency would have been for those people who were already here and established, if they could, to make room for them in, you know, their homes.
I would think that certainly one of the first people they would have sought out when they arrived in Cleveland would have been Aunt Delia. And she would have been one of the first to welcome them. and help them get established, help them find work. She had been in household service herself earlier. Maybe, you know, some of her connections were helpful. We don't know the exact pathway that they all took, but I think that's, you know, she was definitely a significant person in the group.
She was the matriarch, really.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. This is a very significant house in Nancy's story. Everyone coming over from our family would have been given the start, if you like, by Delia. She was very well connected. She was a powerful woman. I can't believe we're here and we're looking at a house that was so important to so many young girls from our area that came over. And Delia would have been able to help them find jobs with the best of families and enabling them to make connections and to gain a better life.
When Nancy arrived and looking around and thinking about opportunities, I think her two older sisters and her aunt had been in household service. So that was probably something that, you know, occurred to her rather readily, and perhaps they even helped her, you know, get her first job. Crucial for them was that they were arriving as single women. Of course, their mother had been married, but her husband had died. And one of the most readily available means of employment for women arriving on their own was to work in service in a household as a maid, as a nanny, as a cook. And Cleveland's prosperity and it's the fact that it was booming in the 1920s was a good thing for the Corrigan family arriving at that time, because there was an explosion of new large houses and an appetite for maids and cooks and nannies.
Here's the family in the 1930 census, the Hitchcock family. And on the top of the next page is Annie Corrigan, servant, and she's just recently come to the U.S. Would have been a very, very good address.
It's amazing.
A great starting point for an ambitious young woman.
I think Nancy learned very fast how to behave and how to get on in society. She had a certain bit of class anyway, and I think girls who came from the west of Ireland, they were very, very charming and very well brought up, and in fact she could have had a lot to teach them. So from here we understand that she took some classes, trained how to become a children's nurse, which would have been a better job for her and she would have earned more money.
Taking that course sort of distinguished her and gave her a skill that not every person in household service would have had. The nursemaid or nanny would have been of a sort of higher status in a household than a maid. The position of nursemaid or nanny brought you into more direct contact, more personal contact with the family you were working for, and might have given Nancy an opportunity to see more closely how these families lived, what their aspirations were, what their connections might be, and maybe how to use them.
The couple that she worked for circa 1931-32 was a younger couple just starting with very young children. And I think this would have been, you know, like a starter house for them. They were well-to-do.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so this is Shaker Heights. So you can see the houses aren't quite as big. I mean, they're very lovely.
Yeah.
This would have been where Willard Sawyer lived in 1930, and we know for definite certain that she worked for them in 1932 when this article appeared about her in the Plain Dealer, and it gives nurse girl in the home of Willard G. Sawyer, 3329 Avalon. So I think that even though it's a less prestigious household, I think probably for her and her goals, it was probably convenient. And also the fact that now in Shaker Heights, she's closer to public transportation. She can make her way downtown and then make her way to the airport for her flight training.
It's not such a grand house, but it was a step in the right direction for her, because here she worked as a nurse girl, which needed qualifications, and Nancy had gained her qualifications as a nurse girl in order to move upward to this house here.
She would have had to take the courses, the hospital courses, probably while she was working, and that would have been extra effort and money. She wouldn't have been making that much, but she would have been channeling it into improving herself so that she could work her way into a higher position.
So it's really, really lovely to see a place where we know for definite that Nancy worked. And this is the house from which she sneaked off on her afternoons off and took flying lessons.
We walk up to the L1. Again, just looking under the wings, checking integrity. We'll start with a cockpit safety check as we climb up the wing. The first thing we check is the mag switch in the off position to make sure the propeller's safe. Fuel selector should be off.
Her employers didn't know, and her mother didn't know. She didn't tell anybody until the first they found out about it was when they saw this article in the Plane Dealer. What do you think they would have thought of her when they read the article in the Plane Dealer?
I don't know. It's hard to say whether they would have appreciated her pluck and initiative or if they would have been aghast. I'd like to think that there was something encouraging about the atmosphere that she found herself in.
We're really just checking for things that may have bumped it that are unusual. This one's almost perfect, so...
I think Nancy is an inspiration to all young women to follow their dream. She had a dream. She wanted to be a pilot. She didn't want to be a nursemaid for the rest of her life. She wanted to fly. And in a way, she was the essence of the American dream. She arrived here with nothing and very quickly worked her way up.
She had to have worked unbelievably hard to get every one of those, to get every hour of flight training in those days. It just had to be a passion that drove her to do that, really.
In fact, there's a story that has come down through the family that she was out walking in the park in Cleveland one day with one of her friends who was probably also a maid. And Nancy says, "Oh, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life." And the friend says, "Well, what are you going to do?" There was a plane flying overhead and she says, "That's what I want to do." Nancy's achievements were so unusual for a servant girl of 19 years of age that she made it to the front page of the newspaper. Here she is. Oops. So that was the front page. Oh, wow. Miss Corrigan, who was 19, made her first solo flight at the Cleveland airport yesterday after less than 5 hours training. According to Donald W. Patrick, chief pilot at the Sundorf Aeronautical Corporation, where Miss Corrigan took her training, it is unusual for a girl to learn to handle a plane as quickly as Miss Corrigan. This is amazing. John Patrick, the guy who trained her, said it was so unusual for a woman to get the hang of flying as quickly as she did. He just praised her competence and her abilities. I think that must have been really good for her confidence. And she'd also moved up the ladder from her first job to her second job. She'd now worked for like 2 up-and-coming, quite wealthy families. And perhaps she was just looking at the way they were living, and maybe some of them were involved in flying themselves. But either way, she didn't pay any attention to the class system or any ideas of staying in her place. She just went for the sky.
For Nancy to be able to learn to fly in the time period and under the conditions in which she did would have taken a lot of fortitude. She had to have perseverance and patience to be able to amass the hours necessary to get her private pilot's license. Of course, she soloed at about 4.5 hours, which is unheard of today. When I was flying, it took me 9 hours. So Nancy was extraordinary in that she soloed at 4.5 hours.
Soloing an aircraft literally means slipping the surly bonds of planet Earth for the first time alone, without a flight instructor in the airplane. And is it scary? Absolutely, it's scary. I always say in aviation, you better stay prayed up and paid up. And so I can just imagine what an exhilarating feeling it was for her, and probably frightening also. And to have achieved it in that amount of hours is just humongous.
Well, in doing a bit of research at schools around the country at that time, it looks like just for your solo pilot's license, it was around $360, $65. And then to go on for your private pilot's license, it was nearly $700, which was a huge sum in those days.
It's hard to say what motivates people, but if you want a better life and see opportunity before you and you have some spunk and adventure, you take the opportunity. As a nursemaid, she still wouldn't have been making probably more than $10 a week or something like that. As a model in New York City, she could make $25 a week. Well, that's a big step up and a step towards achieving the goals that she had in mind, because flying a plane was expensive. The lessons, the permits, the license, modeling could have been a stepping stone financially as well as anything else.
You had to know how to do makeup, you had to know how to do wardrobe, you had to know how to walk, you had to be able to handle the glamour part. But that wasn't what it was all about. You better have the intelligence behind that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to pursue a career in modeling at all. So you wouldn't have been able to in my day, and you certainly wouldn't have been able to in Nancy's day. There would have been a lot of runway modeling in those days. And I always jokingly say one runway to the other. So she was obviously intermittent between runways in those days when she was flying and modeling also.
Nancy's foray into the world of aviation was another thing that may have opened up some prospects and vistas for her. There's a lot of risk involved in flying a plane, but there was something exciting and almost glamorous about it too. The glamour, daring, and excitement of flying fit in with the idea of being a model.
I think people visualized us as having a glamorous life like that, and we allowed them to because it gave us, an air about us that maybe made us a little more enchanting and interesting, but it was really, really just hard work for the most part. Our careers paralleled so much, it's just amazing. It's just uncanny. I was about 30 years behind her in everything she did. The same mentality that would make a female want to be a model, it's a very unique kind of a career, and so that same kind of mentality would be the kind of a mentality that a female would have that would want to be a pilot. We're exploratory people. We're people that want different, unique things. We don't want to do the average. We want to try new things.
Nancy's sister Kathleen told us that Nancy specialized in hand modeling.
She could have been earning good money as a model. Hand modeling was paid very well because it was a really specialized thing. She was one of a select group of people if she was selected for hand modeling.
That's my mother, that's my Aunt Bridget, that's my Aunt Kathleen, and that's my Aunt Nancy. I'm gonna cry. Now, this is a house in Ireland. And I'm sure that's me. That's my Aunt Nancy holding me. She lived in New York, and she was a model. Boy, oh boy. She had a few boyfriends, a couple that were here in Cleveland, and the one that used to come here with her from New York. And he was a cook, and he cooked supper for us in our house, and it was very good. And a very good-looking man, too.
In the day when Nancy learned to fly, aviation was pretty much a men's club, and women had a hard time breaking into the aviation field, even though there had been women in aviation since the very early days. But they faced discrimination. In some cases, they faced sabotage when they were racing, for instance. There was just a distaste for women in aviation.
For a female to enter this man's world, the female's got to be kind of unique and got to be a go-getter and got to be a person who just is willing to take chances and a person who is willing to explore and experiment and, take the extra leap and so forth.
Although she finished out of the wood circle, Jane Page received $1,000 for turning in the fastest time for a woman pilot.
Women had to prove themselves better. And so from the very beginning, we were doubted until women could prove themselves that we had everything that it took. We had the skills, we had the knowledge, we had everything that it took to be able to enter this man's world and do the things that men had accomplished.
Nancy would have had to have really been able to hold her own. There are other obstacles that she was surmounting, the fact that she was an Irish immigrant, the fact that she had started out poor. But I think the fact that she was a woman was probably as important or more important than all those other factors in terms of what she had to overcome and surmount. The fact that she was able to hold her own and become an instructor, the fact that she was willing to travel the country to find, to be able to do what she wanted to do, is another aspect of her determination and her strength.
I think it looks good.
In aviation, to attain the next level of certification, it requires two things: money and hours. And so once you have soloed, then you work towards your private pilot's license. Then you might work towards your instrument rating. So all of this costs just a little bit more for each rating. For Nancy to do that in her day and age was just unbelievable. Not having a backer, not having a patron to help pay her costs and let her just concentrate on flying to earn those certificates and get to those levels was very difficult.
In 1939, war broke out. And by this time, Nancy had about 8 years modelling behind her. She had her private pilot's licence. She wanted a new career, so she applied to join the WASPs. She really wanted to become a pilot in the war, and they turned her down. She was absolutely gutted, and the reason they turned her down was because she hadn't gotten round to getting her American passport. She still had a British passport because she was born under British rule in 1912 in Ireland. So she was very upset, but that didn't keep her down. She became a founder member of an organisation called the Women Flyers of America, who, like the WASPs, were set up to help the war effort. But they had more of an emphasis on training ordinary people how to fly. So maybe this was Nancy being sensitive to enabling people who weren't from wealthy backgrounds, like she hadn't been herself, to be able to fly a plane. The Women Flyers of America were involved with backing up the war effort by providing transport, by flying planes from A to B, by training air cadets how to fly and so on. She was in the New York chapter, so we have photographs of her from the New York Times in 1940. Lieutenant Commander John F. Smith at meeting of Women Flyers of America last night. He's shown with 4 members of the organisation. There is a place in the defence programme for women pilots who would be trained to undertake relief jobs to free men for active service. Her next move then, probably with the intention of getting around the system, was she moved to Tulsa in Oklahoma.
Where did you go in those days if you wanted a career in aviation? Where did you go to train for a career in aviation? You came to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa is the mecca of flight training. I say for the United States, but it's really for the world.
Nancy came to Tulsa back in the early 40s. She attended the Spartan School of Aeronautics, as it was called at that time, to work on her next step. I believe it was her commercial rating. She would have done training on different types of aircraft while she was here. And then, of course, once she attained her instructor's license, then she was the one training other pilots. During the war, Spartan had contracts with the federal government to train military pilots. She probably was training U.S. pilots at that time and possibly civilian pilots as well.
So she was basically teaching pilots in World War II how to fly a plane.
Each step that Nancy would take in a teaching position, for instance, when she left Spartan School of Aeronautics and went to Stevens College, it was most likely a step up for her because it was an all-woman school. There would not have been as much of the discrimination against women as you would have at a mostly men's school.
Nancy was involved in establishing the aviation department in Stevens College in Missouri. Now, Stevens College is an elite college for women, and in those days, the women who would have attended would be from extremely wealthy backgrounds. And the whole purpose of the college really was to teach them cutting-edge skills, and aviation was considered to be the end thing. So Nancy, with a few other women, founded this department, and she taught there for 6 years.
When Nancy was instructing at Stevens College as actually the head of the college, she would have had the organization of 2,300 women attendees that were in the flight program. For 600 of those to graduate and not fail a test for their graduation is pretty incredible. Many of us, myself included, have failed a particular test that would get you to the next level. But in Nancy's case, all of these women that were graduating from Stevens College, to be able to take that test and pass it the first time was amazing.
Well, the first day Nancy arrived in Cleveland, the Cleveland Air Races were on.
Can you imagine what it would have been like to step out of the train station and look up at the sky and see planes buzzing, through the sky as part of the National Air Races? There's her life's dream right there ahead of her, right the first day that she arrives.
In the summer of 1948, Nancy was an instructor and one of the heads of the aviation department in Stevens College in Missouri. But she took the summer off to come to Cleveland because she wanted to fulfill an ambition that she'd had since she first hit Cleveland, to take part in the Kendall Trophy race. Currently, the raven-haired X-model is purchasing a North American 86 trainer to fly in the $7,500 Kendall Trophy race. Purchase of the plane is taking virtually all of her savings. Now she's looking for a sponsor. A sponsor and the accompanying financial backing are a vital part of her plans, she said last night.
Nancy, let's say, decided to exploit her ACL connections and the fact that there was such a large ACL population. The people that immigrated from ACL to Cleveland, many of them were able to make good lives here. The ranks of our judiciary system, our lawyers, our government officials, policemen were filled with people with ACL names.
And this one, she's found a sponsor. Corrigan's of City Back Air Beauty. An ambassador, a doctor, 2 attorneys, some moving men, and a student, all named Corrigan, yesterday answered the call of Miss Nancy Ann Corrigan for financial backing. In recognition of their assistance, Miss Corrigan had the Corrigans of Cleveland painted on the fuselage of her AT-6 racing plane. Few pilots in the races will have a better background of experience than Miss Corrigan, who has logged 5,000 hours in 16 years. Look as if they're standing still. In the summer of 1948, Nancy stayed with her sister Mary in Cleveland and Bartley Kilban, her son. I'm at the Cleveland Air Races 66 years later, and I can't believe I'm sitting beside Bartley Kilban, exactly in the spot where he watched Nancy fly way back in 1948.
You see how close they are?
Yeah,
They're almost touching.
yeah. Look at that. Wow.
Well, I remember my Uncle John and I changing the propeller from a 2-bladed propeller to a 3-bladed propeller, and it was wooden rather than metal. And it had a big bolt on the front of it. I got it started. And I was up on the ladder, and I got it started, but I couldn't, and I had a big wrench, and I couldn't. But Uncle John got it. You know, we switched places, and he got it. And I was only 14 years old.
So what did that do to the plane? What was the purpose?
To give it more speed, more bites into the air, three blades.
Wow.
The flag, the takeoff, and away they go.
In aviation, there are different types of racing. There's endurance, there's distance, but Nancy was a pylon racer, so she was in it for speed and time. And pylon racing is very exacting and grueling. The tension is incredible. It's dangerous, it's intense, and extremely exciting.
The girls get final instruction, a few last words about the rules, and into the plane, ready to go, the feminine pilot.
We were in the stands. My Uncle John was there, and my Aunt Kathleen, she was there, and my mother.
Who served as a wasp in the war. And today...
Oh, everybody was excited about it.
Certainly wish her luck. Nancy Corrigan, a former Powers model, who now teaches flying at Stevens College. Nancy was born in Ireland, and what a sweet colleen she is.
They had pylons. They're like big upside-down cones on the ground.
So it's a kind of a marker, yeah?
And the planes flew around those. Okay. And the race was like a horse race. They went around the pylons.
Oh, I see, okay.
It's a test of a pilot's skills, aircraft management, and really bravery, because it is very dangerous.
The flags go down, and they're off. It's 5 laps on the 15-mile course. Here's the first pylon.
She was in the lead, and this woman was up above her. They were both coming towards the pylon. And the lady that was up above her came down like this.
Okay.
And was going to strike her.
Really?
And how Nancy knew that, I have no idea. There's no mirrors on the plane. And anyway, she went off this way.
Okay.
And this woman came down this way and took her place. We were all so excited about it. We're almost getting hit. We could have just as easily seen a crash of 2 airplanes, and there'd have been 2 dead pilots. I think it was rather obvious to everybody that she would have won, but if it hadn't happened, I think she would have gone right into first place.
Watch those girls, and Nancy Corrigan came in 5th. Don't lose your handbag. You'll need it for the prize money.
That was good thinking on her part. She gave up the first place for safety to let everybody live after that race. So that was obviously wisdom on her part. We have to always know when to give up the win for safety when we're flying air races.
Like when you were watching that happen, what were your feelings?
In all those years, I still remember being excited about the race and watching my Aunt Nancy fly. You know. I had never seen her fly before.
Nancy could have died in those Kendal air races in 1948. Do you think any of her family would have tried to dissuade her or to persuade her not to fly again, like Maggie or?
No. No. I don't think anybody would probably try to dissuade her from doing anything. She was a very independent person.
And was Nancy, when she finished the air race, how did Nancy feel like?
I think, and I'm not sure at all, but I think she probably left town.
I think the fact that you have entered a field that is so different and unique from what most people do for a living, you want to share that with everybody else you have the opportunity to share it with. And so that's why, yes, you want to be a flight instructor so that you can share your exhilarating thrill of flying an airplane with other people. And then flight instructors just grow up to be examiners one day. That's what it amounts to.
Built on the sturdy principles of the pioneers who settled the land, your university stands as a monument to progress, to education.
And she was headhunted then by Kansas City University. They had an aviation department, and Nancy was the first woman head of the aviation department in Kansas.
Language, literature, business and social studies, science and home economics.
We couldn't have found a better person for the job, said Dr. Simpson. Miss Corrigan has an outstanding record for safety. She has single and multi-engine rating, commercial and instrument ratings, and is an accredited primary and advanced flight examiner. She never has had a student turned down by the Civil Aeronautics Administration.
Nancy Corrigan taught me to fly at the University of Kansas in 1950. I was still flying at 85. I was studying aeronautical engineering at the University of Kansas. They had a flying club that Nancy headed up. I certainly joined the flying club and was lucky enough to get Nancy as my instructor.
How about that? Ready to fly.
Had a stick, like we flew an airplane today. Nancy would just take us up and fly. And
it's been 64 years since I've flown a stick. How does it feel? Oh, it feels wonderful.
So flying was quite a bit different back then. We didn't have an intercom or anything, and so she'd just yell, and I'd yell back.
Nancy was a wonderful instructor, patient. I don't think she ever hit me on the head while we were flying. And it was a natural instructor. And I thoroughly enjoyed flying every hour with her. She was just top. We kept flying and managed to solo a little less than 8 hours. And that was something that a pilot always remembers, first landing. And it was probably the best landing ever made.
Oh, I love it. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Hey, love it, yeah, what a great flight, yeah.
She signed me off as a private pilot, but I'm very thankful that she was part of my life. It's just been a delight.
And after all that excitement of Nancy's career, she settled for a more scheduled job. And for the last 20 years or so, she spent her time flying executives around the United States in jets. She flew jets, and she worked for the Erie Resistor Corporation. And she did that right up to her retirement. And she clocked up hundreds of thousands of miles on jets.
It's a testament to Nancy in particular that she could find a job in the corporate world flying commercially. She was one of only 2 women at the time with the multi-engine commercial rating. And for some company to trust a woman in that day and age to fly their corporate executives around the country, that took a lot of guts on their part. It was still a man's world, and she managed to break that ceiling.
Nancy, in her lifetime, had 6,000 hours of flight time. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of flights. That's a lot of pre-flights. That's a lot of end of flights, chalking the wheels when you're done with the flight. So that's a lot of flights that she made in her lifetime.
She went to Florida and she opened a small store, and I never got down to see her, but she died a natural death there and buried in Florida.
I was about 30 years behind Nancy in all the things that I accomplished. And I just would like to say thank you to her, kudos to her for all the things she accomplished so that I could even begin to think about getting into this world and doing the things that I've accomplished. I couldn't have possibly done it without a pioneer like her.
I'm John Corrigan from Ownduff here. and my dad was the first cousin of Nancy, and I grew up here as well, and in the same grounds as where Nancy and all her sisters were when they were children. We would have a plan to try and put up a museum to her memory, like of her achievements, with all memorabilia we have on Nancy from the time she was flying in America. For a lady to leave this part of Ireland and achieve such a thing like that in a man's world, it was just amazing.
How are things, John?
Not too bad, Bernadette, how are you?
Oh, grand, yeah. You're doing great work.
Not too bad now, cannot complain.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely fantastic, John, now that this is the very spot where this needs to be. Yeah, the land she was born on, and where the train would have stopped where her father got killed. We'd have one wall maybe dedicated to her modelling career. We've got those beautiful photographs in the Powers Model Agency. What do you think?
Yeah. And the ones with the flying, we'll put them on that wall.
Yeah.
And then the one with the aeroplane, her standing on the wing of the aeroplane with the Corrigans of Cleveland on that.
Yeah.
That's a fine photograph.
Considering that Nancy Corrigan was the second woman in the United States to achieve that aviation status, I am so proud, so honored to be part of the legacy, and truly feel that the museum here that John Corrigan and Bernadette and Brian Masterson are all working on collectively, I think it's so important, and it must go forward. It's a story that must live and continue. I look forward to bringing my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren back, showing them the legacy and telling them the story.